I could already give you another variation before we even get into it in detail. For instance, well, the ones they pulled out was, the easiest way not to think, this is another piece of information as regards a non-partisan approach, not physically but intellectually, if you were trying to think in a way that we've been trying to call independent, creative, original, which in a sense is impossible, which in a sense is an illusion, but it's only ordinary people would say, all right, that kind of thing is an illusion, I agree with you, I'll take real life. I'm not saying it is, but if it was an illusion, trying to think independently, if you're ordinary and say, well, listen, I'm not going for that, why waste my time, I'll take ordinary life. There is still, no matter what happens, a justice to where people get what they deserve. It's nice to start off, absolutely, going up a smoke-filled alley, right? Non-partisan, toward non-partisan intellectual approach. It says the easiest way not to think this or that about other people, which is right at the heart of people trying to improve themselves. People are always worried about what they think about all the way from their mother and father to just ordinary people, to Democrats, liberals hearing about Republicans and thinking things. And if a man is trying to think for himself, somewhere along the line, whether he be religious or not, he thinks to himself, I have got to get over this kind of aggressive attitude, this kind of negative thing about other people. In other words, thinking this or that about people. That it bugs people, it does it religious people, it does psychological people, it does ordinary people who believe, as they're supposed to, that they should not think so harshly, so judgmentally about other people in particular ways. Particular ways is child's play. And the thing about child's play is you never grow up. There is no way out. This piece of news was the easiest way not to think this or that. Not to get out of it, but the easiest way to deal with it is don't think about people to begin with. Okay, I'll admit, it's hard but impossible. Well, some of them I was going ahead and give you another extended immediate version. This time said, although they are not normally constructed to be able to even see this, nonetheless, everything that men dread is already behind them. This is, if you can begin to see it, you could say it's man's sense of time expanded to the ultimate. Because everyone's nervous system, not physically, sissies is part of what I would infer to you is inferred in the news items when that term is used. Physically, all sorts of people are jittery, humble. They like to call it humble. There are people that are born frightened. In case you never noticed, there are dogs that are born frightened. Yeah. Canine psychologists in the South, I think the technical term, well, I can translate from the German, is called skittish. Intellectually, people's nervous system. Everyone in some way is jittery, uncomfortable. If you're alive, you are. What man cannot see at the ordinary level is everything that a man dreads. And everything you dread's up here, because if you don't think, you can't dread anything. You don't know from nothing. That's, again, from the German, but that's roughly how it comes out, is men don't know from nothing if you can't think. You just stagger along, and either an elephant sits on you, or you sit on an elephant, or you sit on a small animal. It's known as the sit-down food chain. Again, from the German, I'll translate it for you. It's roughly I'll put it in English. It's sit or be set on, is the way it comes out. Everybody dreads something. The ultimate dread, of course, being death for most people, not so. But everybody dreads things. And nowadays, many people would ignore the death part and say, well, they're past that point, because most people still connect the idea of a fear of death with being religious. And many people nowadays are so educated and have gone to northern universities and liberal schools that they say, oh, I'm not religious. And so they would refuse to admit that they even think about death anyway. So they'd pick out other dreads. minor dreads, sub-dreads, dreads before you get there. But here's the thing about it. Everything that men dread is already behind them. You have just, anybody can hear that, if you are ever considering going into analysis or going back to church, whichever one costs the most or the least, whatever you would have spent, you've just saved it. Anything that you can dread is already behind you. And the mind will say no as it's supposed to, or else the mind would have been induced into a kind of limbing over the edge of a man's lip. But it's behind you. If it were not behind you, you couldn't dread it. You couldn't even think about it. But everything that men say, well, I dread the thought of what are they going to figure out? I dread the thought I've just gone into a new relationship. Let's try to find something really human. I've just fallen in love again, but my heart has been broken so many times. I know what heartbreak is. And I just know something bad's going to happen. It could be that. It could be I've taken a new job. I've opened a new business. If you dread something, why do you dread it? Well, I have some experience in it. But then the mind, if I try to go, then people go, my ass. And they say, that didn't have anything to do with it. I'm just learning from experience. No, they're not. And yet they say, well, yes, I am. The only reason you're right, they're saying to me. You're right that I said that I fear getting into a new relationship because my heart has been broken afore. Some people that get carried away speaking Middle English, kind of but I've been hurt before. And I'd say, well, it's already behind you. And they said, no. The only reason I know I'm hurt is what you were saying is I've been hurt before, and so I know it can happen. I just don't trust men or women, whatever sex you are. Only you know. Truth is, only you care, but I know we're supposed to pretend that we care, but did I muck it up again too much for it? If you told somebody, let's start the news item, if you said everything you dread is behind you, and the person said, well, my current dread is love affairs. I've just fallen in love again, and I almost hesitate to get in that deep because I just know it never works out. And so I say, well, what? Did you hear this news item? Everything you dread is already behind you. And if an ordinary person might say, well, all right, now in a sense what you say is true, that news item, because I have been heartbroken before, which is how I know it can happen. And see, then at one level I could, if I was being foolish, jump in and go, that's what the news item said, it's behind you. But ordinary mind would go, nothing. It can happen again. Yeah, it happened to me before. That's the only reason I know it can happen. I learned from my experience. That is, I know that it could happen again. Do you hear? They do not learn from experience. If there was anything to learn, they would have learned it. Somebody broke their heart, and you said, well, I learned that, and you'd move on. If the nervous system actually was involved with being taught, if it was actually involved with being learned, then go back to a physical level, like lab mice. They learn to go through a maze, or they learn to mash something, and they mash a red button, and they get a pellet of food, they mash a blue one, and they get a little shock on their feet. Mice, which they buy, the last I heard, is like $7 a dozen. I mean, in case you want to compare your worth with that, they get a dozen for $7. Those mice can learn that. The last I read something was like in 2 or 3 tries. In other words, heartbreak, or nice love affair, and they do this, a couple of times. After that, the little white mouse will never touch the red one again. I mean, he can be starving, and he knows the one right next to it, the blue, will get food, and at first time he couldn't tell, once or twice, but he will stand there and starve himself almost to death before he'll touch it. Now, I believe, I may be foolish, and I certainly have no degree in psychology, but I would suggest that almost qualifies as learning from experience. I could be wrong. But notice, humans will say it's almost the opposite. They'll say, well, I learned from experience. Now, you didn't lose your place. And if you try to jump in and say, wait a minute. Humans don't lose. Go back to my made-up example. If we tell this guy, not just humans generically, but if we told a guy, you don't learn from experience. You're saying that your heart's been broken before when you fall in love, especially a good-looking woman or man or somebody that you really like. If you like them, they're not, some way along the line, they're going to hurt you, right? Yes. Because it's happened to me before. And if you went, well, it's behind you. They would go, no. Yeah, it happened to me. But that's how I learned. Learned what? Learned a lesson. Can you do better than that? Of course they can't, but what I was doing is like, well, I learned it can happen again. That's getting better. But what kind of lesson is that? The mouse, once or twice. Within a matter of 15 minutes, learned the lesson forever and moved on. You can't give the mice that thing again. And a human. So, well, the news manager just asked me to try to move along faster instead of spending so much time on one item. It is simply, and I'll admit, as best I can admit, pretending it's my opinion and all that crap, that it's real hard to change what you are. But notice, even if you couldn't change what you are, hormonally, even if you could not change in your lifetime, what happens to you down in the basement, physically, that runs your brain, that runs your personality? Even if you couldn't, would not there be a person here and there that would go, well, even if you couldn't, what you're talking about would be kind of neat to see what's going on in the areas that I can't change. If I couldn't change my whole life, wouldn't it be nice to see what is going on rather than continue to holler things like, well, learn from experience, when there is no such thing. Not when you get down to it. Learn from experience is you keep dragging the past around. And there was a news item last time that pointed out the dead are on your trail. The dead will track you down, or vice versa. It's up to you, was the way the news item went. Which ordinary people, that's a joke again, because it's not up to them. The dead are on their trail. The dead is tracking everybody. And I don't mean just your ancestors, which they are, because it's your memory. It's your genetic memory. Well, my heart's been broken. Well, every time I try to do something in life, I always fail. So why should I know they've talked me into trying this new thing, a new hobby, or I'm going to take up skydiving or cliff climbing, or I'm opening. They want me to go in business, but Jesus, I know what'll happen. Dread. Well, what have you dread's already happened? Well, yeah, I failed before. And of course they go, what the hell does all that mean? It means if you wanted to, if you could, whatever you personally dread, and I just picked out several things at random, whatever, just your dread of life, specific things, the only reason you dread it, it's already happened to you. And the subtle part is, an ordinary mind will say, well, sure it has, or I wouldn't know to dread it. And that's when, if you learn how to think, you want to go, well? And they go, well, what? Then maybe try the mouse story on them. Of course, people don't like to be compared, especially unfavorably, to a lab mouse that, comes $7 a dozen. And a man thinks, I spent damn near $150,000 going to college, and you want to me that a mouse? Well, at any rate, if dread, if the jitters, if the unfinished nervous system were not part of the ordinary state of man, then would it not be kind of a relief? Not that you've explained it away, because there's nothing to explain away, but just realize anything that you personally dread is already behind you. It's like you got a whole set of mirrors around your head that's behind you, and you're looking, in front, but you're seeing behind. And it's an ordinary person. It's part of stability. There is a kind of low-level awareness of this, as witnessed by such things as psychoanalysis, philosophy, confession in church. But the whole thing about talking about yourself. Why do people do it? They say, well, I'll maybe talk out the problems I've had in the past. Maybe I could go into analysis. Somebody that specializes in sexual dysfunctions or whatever, and I'll tell them about all the problems I've had with love affairs. Or if nothing else, maybe I'll just talk to my mother, my best friend. We'll sit around and we'll talk about it, and people say they feel better. It doesn't get anywhere. That is, it doesn't cure them. It's not supposed to. But notice there is the awareness that whatever I'm dreading right now is somewhere back there. But then they have to, as they're supposed to, they condense it to the point that it is singular to me. It is a specific something that's happened to me. And if you said, no, it's not, it happens to everybody. They can say, well, it may happen to a lot of people, but it happened to me specifically. I can go get 2 or 3 women that did break my heart. Or 2 or 3 men. And you say, well, you see, and they still take it specific. They take it personally. That it happened to me on a personal basis, and that's why I dread it now. Try the mouse story again. Now that I made it up, even I like that. You can start using it as your own litmus test anytime that you begin to feel either real kind of cocky or otherwise. Either feel cocky or begin to really get the serious jitters about, just life is kind of spooks me anyway, is to think. $7 a dozen. If you want to, check. But what I'm frightened of, they may even be cheaper than that. A dozen and a white loudmouse within 30 minutes learns a lesson that he never forgets. Never, never. They can't make him unforget it. And yet a human. He's too intelligent for that. No, I don't want to think about it that way, he said. I know. All right, there was another one. Oh, life, intellectual life in this universe, this whole universe, it says, is carried on in a kind of invisible ocean, a water. And man is like a form of internal, that is inside the universe itself, this living universe, that man is like a form of ESP. May I suggest to you, it's not brought in ESP, everybody knows that's the kind of thing they use in parapsychology and believing that people have an additional sense than the ones that written in books, which anytime you feel that way again, may I quote myself, I could refer you back to the white mouse, like, well, boy, we could use an extra sense. And so the ones we got are not getting me that far. Got little white mices can outsmart me. You're right. I certainly think, I believe I'd like to believe in ESP. I think we should believe in 2 or 3 additional senses. Either that, or according to how you look at it, or believe that we don't even have as many as we have, because that'd help explain your condition. It's your choice. You're the human. It's up to you. At any rate, the ESP thing I was going to point out, that you could look at man as being the paradigm, if you've got any grasp of that, of all the ideas of parapsychology in the fullest sense of the word. That is, of things that cannot apparently be critiqued, observed in a laboratory setting. All the way from religion, which now they call it parapsychology, it's the same stuff, that there is a life behind what we see. If there is, it's a form of communication. That is, it's a transfer of energy. Not that people that talk about the occult and ESP and all that, not that they understand what's going on, because they understood what was going on, they wouldn't be talking about it or putting funny names on it. But if the reality behind it, if there be such, which there is, it would be that man himself is the invisible communication. That man himself, at the intellectual level, remember, this said intellectual because physically, man contributes to that, but physically you have, observably, energy being transferred from planet to planet through all the laws of physics. But where are the unknowns? Where are the living parts, the intelligent parts? As far as you can observe right now, as far as science. You can't see any other intelligent creatures in this universe. You don't see them on this planet. So where is that kind of energy? How is it being transmitted? Man is not only the message, man is the medium. That man is a form of ESP inside the universe, not amongst himself, inside the universe itself at the intellectual level. That he is the secret communication. But people think, ordinary people think, yes, I'm talking. Nobody ever says, well, of course they fool around and say, well, something's talking to me, and then they say it's some dead Indian, and I'm channeling, for Pinky Lee or Judge Crater. Forget that. But of course, as always, it reflects something real. But people say, I am thinking and I am talking. But what if it is, instead of you being just an intellect, you're a phone receiver. You're an intercom. Now, I don't want to think about that. I know. Don't blame you. After that, it'd be that. A few steps past that, you'd lose your job, you'd quit shaving, and you'd try and fall in one of those boxes, that only had 11 Mises, and you'd look, hey, there's room. Get a job. Get Mies, intelligence, and water find their appropriate level. That actually meant something, but we'll have the decency not to pursue it. More of the unrecorded history of the intellectual domestication and civilization of man, : one of the purposes of having a home is so that you don't have to go there. Could I suggest that you in this, one of the purposes of having a home is not having to go there. Replace the word home, or look at home as being man's intellect. Now, at the ordinary level, people say something else. In fact, there's an old, kind of truism, colloquial proverb that says, that defines home is the one place where if you go there, they can't throw you out. That's one. Which sounds right. Well, that's true. Everybody needs a home. Everybody needs a friend or your mother or father if they're still alive. Someplace where, if it's a neighborhood bar, that you've been there so much, but everybody needs a home, a place that when you go there, they can't throw you out, or they won't throw you out. They won't turn you away. All right. That sounds right. This one is not just a takeoff on that, but it is almost coeval to it in a strange way. That this says that part of the purpose, but remember the heading was the intellectual domestication and civilization of man, that once man began to talk, that was when he became domesticated. He was no longer an animal. He began to talk amongst himself. The talk became a form of the dance. A man began to talk under circumstances where in the past he would have killed each other. He talked to, even amongst the sexes, he would begin to talk to a woman as opposed to raping her, even before they had the term rape. That aggression of all sorts began to slowly or gradually, periodically, spasmodically be replaced by talk. That was the domestication. And then the item said one of the purposes of having a home, one of the purposes of having an intellect, is so that you don't have to go there. If this was ordinary man, you said part of the purpose, one of the purposes of having an intellect, of being domesticated, which is what that is, being civilized, is to have an intellect. That one of the purposes of having an intellect is so that you can always return to it, so that you're always sane. And when that life really gets spooky, weird, that at least if you're sane, you can go away, retreat for a little bit, get away from the crowd, or just jump back in the closet, go to the bathroom, or do something, and kind of go, I've got to pull myself together. These people around here are too strange. Everything is getting a bit out of hand intellectually, but at least I've got my sanity. Maybe I should leave. Maybe I should gather. In other words, go back home. That's ordinary. This news item, I suggest to you, or at least the way I'm about to analyze it, is for the unordinary people. The non-ordinary man, someone trying to think, would see it another way. The purpose of having a home is so that I don't go there. How about as per a news item from last show that said was a definition, was repetition is sanity to the ordinary. To a thinker, repetition sucks. Now, I know it was crude, but no, it wasn't. It was factual. Repetition is sanity. How do people know they're sane? When do people have a home? It's so that you go there, you know where you are. Even if you didn't have family to go there and take you in, you got an apartment, you got a home, the mortgage is paid off, you got the key, nobody else does. You got a dog there, the dog likes you, he won't bite you. You can go there, and it's a place, a refuge. But now forget physically speaking, because nowadays a physical refuge is of very little importance anymore than the kind of physical life of worrying about whether you're going to eat and etc. and get laid and get out of the cold. But to go home is to get away, and it's like a refuge from what could be intellectual insanity, uncertainty, instability out there, weird people. Jesus, give me a break, I got to go. From another view, if you're trying to think, that's no big deal. That is not necessarily a good deal. Part of the purpose of having a home is then to kind of pull yourself together and think, I'm getting the hell out of here. Or I'm not going back there seriously. If you keep going back there, how do you ever expect to change? Of course, you're ordinary. Hell yeah, you'll expect to change. That don't prove anything. Ha! Don't try and pull that crap on me. I'll continue to be me and change. Got to work on it. It'll happen. Don't bug me. One of the purposes of having a home, one of the purposes of being you is what? To stay me. Wrong. Don't raise your hand with that answer. You're you by the time you're 6 or 7. Do you like that kid that said that, it's not surprising the shape he was in when you consider the way he'd been abused and pushed around? His buddy said, hell, you're only 6. And he said, yeah, and it's going to get worse. Which it will, if you stay home. traveling fact. Well, it was a long one. I was going to rephrase it for you. Here's what it amounts to. We've skated around the edge with other news items having to do with this. It has to do with, like last time we pointed out that there were, or the news item did, that there were two sort of main hobbies, or two classes of people, or two pursuits that men can have in life. And one is, or two groups of men, that's the one I was referring to, that people who say in two groups of dumb people. The first group of dumb people are those who say and think dumb things. The second group, even dumber, are those that criticize the first group. This news item tonight had to do with the fact that everyone has something in mind to replace whatever they criticize. They have something already in mind that's even dumber than what they were criticizing. There's been 2 or 3 news items about this in the past, whether you can string them together or not. But note, the news item from last time, I just tried to rephrase, is not just a crude attack on humanity and to say, well, there are two groups of dumb people, those who say and think dumb things. If you're partisan, if you live at home, back in your mind, then in the sense we mean dumb around here, you know it's not a pejorative term because your parents are dumb, you're dumb, your best friend's dumb, your children are dumb if you have any children. I don't know what you expect, but don't take it personal. Everybody's dumb in the sense that if you think partisanly, you don't understand what's going on in life anyway, and you can take an ordinary, intelligent man and take him aside, and he'll put up with the word dumb, talk about other people for a minute, and then he'll know what you mean. It's not just a blanket attack that everybody's stupid except us or anybody that would make up this kind of crap news. But it is dumb in the sense it's a one-way street. It's people attempting, once they're trying to become civilized, as per another news item that I noticed nobody asked, but it has to do when men fighting. Because if you're civilized, domesticated, you're supposed to be in this constant, quote, struggle against your basic, older animal instincts. And one guy, tonight, after he realized what was going on and found himself in the struggle, finally decided, well, if that's the way it is, then the one he came up with, well, I'll just use my pecker as a third leg to walk with. I'll agree that may sound a little obscure even when you hear it the second time. But it's like, all right, if I got to struggle against being an animal, at least I'll try to twist it around and use it some way in my ordinary life. That is dumbness. But it's unavoidable. What's somebody going to do? It ends up, psychology has, what do they call it, transference, sublimation, projecting on other people. It's taking, you know there's many stories, they make them up every day. No, it's new information, it's new facts, but about suddenly a man beats up his wife, and it turns out that they say, well, our opinion after talking to him and putting him under hypnosis and slapping him around is he has unconscious cross-dressing desires. That when he was a child, he always wanted a yellow dress, and his mother said, you're going to be a football player or die, and now he ends up beating up women. And many ordinary people go, well, that explains it. That's the same thing of this guy who found himself in the struggle, as strange as it sounds. He thought, well, if that's the way it's going to be, I'll just use my dick as a third leg. What else are you going to do? That man, whoever he was, saved himself all that money for analysis. Plus, if he actually knew what he said, he understands what the struggle to be civilized is. Plus, he understands he didn't come up with the struggle, which was another news item tonight to point out that there was a kid, there was a history of civilization again, that after a few early years of playing out in the yard, to become domesticated, to become civilized, to become decent, to engage in the proper struggle, then after early years of playing around just freely outdoors, a man finally brings himself into the house, into civilization. Then he spends, by and large, at least up here, the rest of his adult years, the next 30 or 40 years, wishing, trying, dreaming of getting back outdoors. That was a guy saying, well, if that's the way it is, that's dumbness, back to where we were. That you can't help it. If you live in the house, you're dumb because you don't know how to get out. And you'll admit it. Intelligent people, you don't have to make it sound like an attack and say they're dumb, but they will admit, yeah, what we normally think of, by and large, is dumb, if you can put it that way. So, the news item pointed out that there were two groups, according to that particular slant, those who say and think dumb things, and the even dumber who criticize the first group. To say they're even dumber, it's a dance. It was just to sort of make a ephemeral point. Because you could look at a dancing, you could look at a tango couple, or an Apache, a man and woman doing an Apache dance, or somebody just waltzing. And from one view, you could say, well, normally, at least in the Western world, the woman follows, as they call it, and the man leads. The woman's dancing backwards. So you could look and say, well, she's dumber because she's following. You can't say it's dumber. So to say that there's a second group who criticize the first group and even dumber, there does seem to be validity. It's why you laughed at it. You've laughed at it several times. Every time I say it, you'll laugh again because it does strike somewhere. But here it is. It is not that they are dumber. It's not that one group's better than the other. It takes both of them to go. Because whoever's criticizing the other one now, like a split second later, they can be dancing the other way. This news item, what I want you to consider, because you can see it in you can see it as part of the dance that keeps life going, it is part of the intellectual progress, as it appears to be, that everyone who criticizes, now this is not the way they look at it, of course. We're talking about ordinary people. Remember, this is not just an exercise in sarcasm. Ordinary people, they'll look politically, religiously, socially, at some other group, some other person, and criticize. And let's say in an erudite, astute, rationally acceptable manner. In fact, others around them may hear that they say, people who believe that kind of political claptrap are a danger to their fellow man. They are dumb, does not begin to cover it, but they are dumb. And people around them will go, yes, yes. And let's say that you are around them. Let's say that you are in a certain environment that, let me just pick out just an absolute arbitrary, that this person is criticizing totalitarian governments, and you grew up in a republic, and you feel like you're in favor of it. Now you stand, and some man's making an absolute blanket, unconditional attack, criticism of totalitarian governments, and pointing out, as you already know, the obvious, arrest without warrants, without trials, and torture as a way of political expediency, and etc. And the man just criticizes it. And any reasonable person standing there, including, let's say you, if you're back living at home, you go, well, yes, how can you deny that? Then also, tacit in the criticism is that at least the person knows better that's criticizing the dumbness. Well, you just assume it. You assume it the same way that you look east in the morning, the sun's coming up. That the man has something better in mind. But at least he is smarter than that which he's criticizing, right? El wrongo, that's Spanish. El incorrecto, that's a cigar that tastes real bad. But anyway, it's not so. No. I mean, at the ordinary level, it's got to be, because I just described it. Even if a person had if you say, well, what would be your political plans to replace this? He may say, well, hey, I'm not a politician. I'm pointing out, though, the error of this. And all sane people staying around go, well, yeah. You understand that the rational, from anybody's view, not our view, let's just accept it, from a viable, rational view, whatever it was, religious, political, social, a criticism that seems rational to the group staying there for the environment. The criticism implies, and it's accepted, that the criticism implies that the critic is smarter than that which he's criticizing, if you agree with it. And if it seems to be a standard, rational, contemporaneous criticism, valid critique, even if the person says, well, hey, I'm not a politician, I can't tell those people how to run their governments and their affairs, but I'm just simply pointing out that tyranny is not the way to do it anymore. You can't, that's not the way to do people. And everybody goes, yeah. So, tacit in it is that all criticism implies that the critic, at least at an objective level of his criticism, is smarter than that which he's criticizing, right? And the whole world goes right, because it is right, except for this. It's not right. Not if you're trying to think, because all critics, they do, even if they won't say anything, they have something in mind to replace what they're criticizing. And many times why they won't say it, they don't know why, but I'm telling you why. It's because everybody has something in mind to replace anything they're criticizing. And what they have in mind is always dumber than what they criticize. It's hard, but it's hard. If it were not so, and sometimes it's not so, and when it's not so, the criticism, people walk off and forget it. For a criticism to persist, the critic had something in mind, whether he says overtly and directly or not. He can even say, well, no, I don't know. I'm not sure what to do. Well, that's dumb. Well, why did you criticize? Well, I'm just pointing out the error. I'm not an expert in everything. Well, why don't you shut the hell up? Now I'm, of course, playing a serious game like in a thinker's head. Like you looking real quick, because this does not or should not go in between people. It wouldn't accomplish anything. But see, I've already set up the thing for you that an ordinary person, from an ordinary view, anything he criticizes, even if he has no alternative to offer, he is more intelligent than that which he's criticizing. Or he wouldn't have the ability to see the error of it. Right, right, right. Yeah, I know it's right. Except it's not. Because only the dumb criticize. No matter what they criticize. And what they have in mind, no matter whether they say it or not, is dumber than what they were criticizing. And if you have trouble seeing that, it's this dumb. We've got two ordinary people dancing. A tyrannist and a republicanist. Two anybody's. One of them, the man in charge, the man who favors anti-tyranny. He's dancing with the man who favors tyranny. Or a man who was a tyrannist. Or who had a brother who was a tyrannist. Or who lives in a place where they've had tyranny and they don't know what to do. So they're dancing. It could be 2 people. It could be 2 million people. It could be 2 theories separated by 1,000 years. Doesn't matter. We're talking about energy. And they're dancing. And the one man, the one group, the one era says tyranny is not the way. It's not the most profitable way for men to gather together, be domesticated, civilized, and run their affairs in a profitable manner. And they're dancing. Another man who does not seem to be on his side, or they wouldn't be dancing. Because if they're dancing, they have some differences. Or else you're in a real funny place. Because you miss that. You go into a bar, if it's a regular bar, and people are dancing, it's people of different sexes. A man and a woman, right? Anybody who's dancing, even at the intellectual level, they're of different sexes, metaphorically speaking. So the man who's saying tyranny is not the way the men should run their affairs, then the person he's dancing with, or the group, or the era, has an alternative view, or they wouldn't be dancing. Now back to what I said, that whatever his alternative is dumber. Why? How can that be? Because what he's saying is, whatever you think and you're dancing with me, you shouldn't be doing it. That's dumb. That is asking, it won't work, but that is asking for suicide. I am here. I'm not a critic of the world, says a man. Well, I'm not the judge of the world. I'm not the final judge. If he was smart, I'm having to make up what smart, ordinary people think, which I notice I don't get any awards for this, but a smart, ordinary man says, I am not the ultimate judge of man, but I am in a position, being a forthright, objective, decent, educated person, I am in a position to criticize certain unprofitable ideas that men have. That, if you can see it, is dumb. Because whatever they're pointing out that they're criticizing, and it may appear, everybody around them, 99% of the people who hear it may go, I agree, we all agree, that what you criticize deserved criticism. What he had in mind to replace it was dumber than what he's criticizing. How can that be? Because if he knew anything, he would know there's nothing to criticize. So whatever he's got in mind is dumber than what he was criticizing. Because he's wanting the person now dancing backwards with him, which is always resisting some. What he's wanting to do is, hey, merge with me, quit dancing with me, turn into me. It's suicide. Put at the most basic level, if it made it any clearer, which based on the reaction from 30 seconds ago, maybe it didn't. But once you see that there's nothing to criticize in life, then anybody who does criticize, no matter what the guys, no matter how many flags they raise, no matter how much of a preface and an intro to their song and dance about, I'm not the ultimate judge of man, and I'm not really here to prick on anybody, and they go on and on and on. They have testimonials coming up for an hour saying, this man is broad-minded, he is not anti-anything, he is here simply as an intellectual critic, an observer of human nature to help you through all this, and you go, come on with it. So he comes out and says, I am simply here to try to point out that we should not have these kind of ideas that upset other people. You know, does that sound safe? Does that sound like a man after all this intro and you paid your money threw out large vats of room temperature tapioca on you? In other words, it sounds like he's making a valid criticism of something that's indefensible. We should not be having ill thoughts about one another. How about that? On your behalf, on the behalf of humanity. My observation, which is coming out as a critique, is that men should not have ill thoughts about one another. Under any sane, ordinary conditions, who can go and stand up and go, oh no, boy, is that uncalled for? Certainly not. In other words, his criticism is valid by almost anybody's reasonable view today, right? Even if he offers no immediate alternative, his criticism itself appears to be walking, talking, breathing, healthy criticism. That the criticism itself, his objective observation as he wanted to call it, itself is healthier, more intelligent than that which he's criticizing. That is, we should not have ill thoughts one man to another. But now you got to be able to look. We're not discussing what he said. We're discussing the fact that him criticizing life is dumber than anything he can ever criticize. There's no way out once you see it. And the reason people don't want to see it, of course, if you see it, then you got to stop. No, I don't want to. You know, let them stop. Because most of those people, you're right, are dumb. But sometimes I see stuff that really annoys me. No, you don't. You're jittery. You got hormones. No, there's some of these political, no, your ass. It's hormones. You got a nervous system that's got the jitters. And what's it going to do nowadays? In times past, you get the jitters and you go out and try and wrestle with a dinosaur. Go out and try and attack every caveman's wife that even looks good at you at all, especially if he's a lot bigger than you. In other words, good physical exercise. Not all this crap of trying to lose weight so you can get in this year's fashion, or save up and get your hair done, or build up muscle so that you get in a posing contest. We're talking about real exercise. Get out and attack a saber-toothed lion, tiger. That. But since you can't do that, what do? Your nervous system has got the jitters. Hormones got nothing to do, and they're always... Of course, this still happens physically, as many of you know that, and you realize, well, crap, I better go run or do something because, that's nothing. There's always a cure for that. The simple one is just run till you drop. You can always do that. But the jitters now that civilized, domesticated men have to be contend with is in here. And it comes out how? Is it supposed to? It comes out as objective observations. It's criticisms. All you got to do is listen. We've been through this enough. All you got to do is listen. Criticize everything from news programs to weather forecasters to ministers to any other thing we've ever mentioned. Anything anybody can mention. It is a running battle of criticism. And at least half of it sounds well-founded, because at least half of it, more or less, you agree with. It's dumber than anything being criticized. There is no way out. It is again one of those undiscovered laws of physics that is not suitable, cannot be codified, cannot be written down, cannot be proven, because it itself would be suicidal to the arrangement of things as they are. But anything the mind, I can say the ordinary mind, anything a man's ordinary mind, anything the talking nervous system of a man can criticize, the man has something in mind to replace it, which perforce is dumber. No matter what it is that he's criticizing, it's dumber. Because it can be the most apparently valid criticism, such as, we should not think ill of each other. No sane person can naysay that. You can't say, yeah, we should. We should all go around just, despising each other. Even if you go ahead and put on a show and say, oh, it's good to see you. As best you can, dislike everybody secretly. That's ridiculous, right? Sure. But to say that that criticism is valid, to say, well, we should not think ill of each other. Anybody would say that has no more idea what's going on in life than you do, than the Pope does, than the Prime Minister does. They don't know anything. They're still taking that crap seriously. No, we got to straighten up here. Not physically. They're not talking about behavior now. They're not. This is way past. This is more domesticated, sophisticated, and civilized than we shouldn't kill each other. We're talking about behavior. They established that 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. They already decided we can't do that. They decided so much that if you kill people 5,000 years ago and they say you do it, they've got a nice treatment for that. Not just a criticism. Well, you can call it physical criticism. They kill you. They don't have to say don't do that again. They don't have to criticize your behavior. So that kind of behavior, dealing with that, was established almost as soon as Brunhilde and Bruno walked out of the silent garden and began talking like, "Good God, are you ugly?" or whatever they said. Where'd you get that name? Now the jitters are up here now. And it's a matter of criticism. Now I know people still kill each other, we know all that. But the attitude, man's attitude via life, or life's attitude via man, is now codified, it is systematized to the point that, you know, there's no great exceptions. They hadn't changed their mind that, well, maybe it is all right to kill each other. You know, they've been saying that 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. What if they're wrong? Maybe we should just, start killing each other again. Like, I just feel like it's the right thing. No, that's been established. Well established. What's not well established is at the intellectual level, the non-behavioral level. That stays open to further discussion, further argument, further debate, further dancing, which is the area of criticism. See, nobody stands up now and they don't offer criticism of the laws against murder. Nobody stands up and says, we should repeal the laws against murder. Murder should be as freely available, as buying soft drinks. It should, maybe you should buy a license, right? Maybe they should charge you $10 like a driver. But, we should repeal the laws. Nobody's going to say that. That's established. That's not open to debate among sane, ordinary people. What is not established is intellectual criticism in the areas of the arts, religion, everything that is singular to man, everything that can be talked about is yet to be established if it's based on talk. Therefore, everything is open to criticism. It's got to be if it's alive, because half of whatever people think in the world, half whatever the people are thinking right now, the other half, more or less, disagree with. And it can change. Suddenly, the people over here go, well, maybe we're wrong, and they start thinking this. But as soon as they do, the other half will go, uh-oh. That's the way it goes. Once you understand that, then you could say this news item does kick in, because what ordinary minds criticize, any ordinary mind, whatever it criticizes, has something in mind. Whether it can say it or not, I don't mean ordinary people are willfully, consciously withholding it. People that say, well, I don't have anything to offer in an alternative, but at least I know that's not right. I don't mean that they're holding back. I'm saying it's part of the built-in transfer of information and energy that anybody who criticizes, they have something in mind dumber than that which they're criticizing. Well, for one thing, they got their mind in mind, which is dumber, because they wouldn't be criticizing. If they knew anything, they wouldn't be criticizing. They wouldn't be saying, wait a minute. This deserves to be looked at. Now, if you're dumb, it does. Wait, this needs to be seriously discussed, perhaps even elect or appoint a blue ribbon committee to investigate this and then report to some Senate subcommittee, and then, very likely, we'll see it may deserve legislation, proposed legislation. Maybe we should pass a new law. That's not dumb. Well, no, not ordinarily. But extraordinarily, it is extremely dumb. Because whoever's talking about that, they're ordinary now. They're supposed to be doing it. I'm glad they are, and you should be too, because if they weren't, somebody'd have to do it. And for all you know, life, finally get around to us and say, hey, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to become a lobbyist, or you're going to have to, run for city council, or worse yet. Life says, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to get serious for the last 10 or 15 years. We just ran short around here. You're going to have to get serious. You're going to have to act serious. You're going to have to, get ulcers, get high blood pressure. Well, at least act like it. Which if you act like it, you're going to get them anyway. That's part of being ordinary. There was one last one I was going to hit since It's just us, if I got it. Pretending that certain intellectual, strictly human things did not happen is good enough to pretend they didn't. Because they didn't. The variation I was going to offer, that's enough, evidently, and you people are going to have to go with that one. It's like, if you understand it's the ordinary world again, it's good enough to pretend. It's like what's behind you is tied to that. Whatever you dread's already happened. Once you say it, forget it. You know, if you can do it, there's nothing else to be said. Also, if you could do it another way, if you could willfully pretend that certain things intellectually, beyond that it doesn't amount to anything. Just forget. But we're talking about intellectually. All the things that singularly can harm a person. Things that happen that you didn't like. No ones that you actually worry about are up here anyway. You don't really make that distinction normally, but just being sick or having root canal work and all those other funds, or you broke your leg once. Anybody's saying you do not drag that around. That is not what you... It's not that further dread. If you got insanity just because you broke your leg once, you don't go around the rest of your life. If you're just sane by anybody's definition, you do not go around the rest of your life, hiring people to go before you, to carry you because you might break your leg again. Nuh-uh. But break your heart's another thing. That can. So, from another view, this one was pointing out that you could pretend that certain things didn't happen, and it would be good enough. Now, this is, of course, not ordinary people, because psychology immediately, or psychologists would leap from behind some tall building and grab you and say, "Sir, come to your senses. You can't do that. That'll make things even worse." Yeah, I know. So we're not talking about that. We're talking just us pretending that things intellectually, things that just normally happen, to pretend they didn't happen, that is, like forget them, is usable. But for a very good reason, not psychological reason. It's for a very good reason to pretend they didn't happen, because once you see it, pretend's kind of a trick word. The reason it's all right is because they didn't. Kind of took care of that. But what I was going to say was that also, just a little beyond that, you could look at the whole idea of trying to think in some extraordinary way tied to this. You could look at it as not a matter of some great moment of epiphany, even as the New Zion pointed out, forget the idea of a long-lasting moment of epiphany. I mean, there are constantly those little flashes, but once you get good at that, the little flashes should come constantly. What other people work their whole life for that great moment of epiphany. If you can think, I mean, hell, they should be happening like, well, how often does your brain fire? Well, that's asking too much. How about I'll pick a ballpark figure. Once an hour? The other things that people spend their whole life, and finally it happens once, and they swoon and grow their fingernails out and start a cult and dye their hair and write a book. Well, I understand that. But if you can think, those kind of things, once an hour is kind of the minimum.